Hello everyone, and welcome to my podcast. Today's episode is on the highly sensitive person. In a previous episode, more precisely, episode 8, I spoke about the highly sensitive child, in which I explained this tendency using the 4 aspects that Dr. Elaine Aron writes about in both her books, The Highly Sensitive Child and The Highly Sensitive Person. I then shared her 4 keys to raising a joyous, highly sensitive child. Today, I want to address the highly sensitive person, the adult, who was already parented without this awareness by their parents, and therefore may have struggled because they were never understood. They were seen as weak, as crybabies, as shy and very sensitive, along with many qualities that we already talked about in that episode. So in this episode, I will remind you of the 4 main aspects of being highly sensitive using the acronym DOES, DOES. I'll first walk you through how each of these traits show up in your life if they were not understood and worked on. Then I'll show you what they look like when they're transformed into strengths. Lastly, and most importantly, I'll guide you on the work that you can do with each trait so it becomes a source of power rather than a weakness or limitation. So as you already know, D stands for depth of processing, O stands for overstimulation or easily overstimulated, E stands for both emotional responsiveness and empathy, S stands for sensitive to subtle stimuli. So let's start from the top. D, depth of processing. This means that you process information deeply. You think a lot, and many times you think about your own thinking. Like, why am I thinking this way? What led me to think this way? And you analyze and discover more about yourself and about many things around you generally. So you have a lot of questions, regardless of whether you ask them or not, because this depends on the response that you got as a child to your questions. But you are generally a curious person who wants to understand things and have a rich inner world. You tend to also have a strong intuition. You feel like you just know things and can predict the outcome of things, like you have a sixth sense. And that's because your subconscious mind processes subtleties without your full awareness. Now, this can be overwhelming because you notice a lot, which is the 4th aspect that we will talk about later. But because you notice a lot, it tends to be a lot to process. So you need to take your time to think about it and think about it some more. And you may get stuck in analysis paralysis. So yes, you'll consider yourself an overthinker, and you tend to be slow to make decisions because there is a lot to think about and think through in order to make that decision. You also get mentally exhausted easily because, of course, you think about everything a lot. So even things that do not need much of a thought for other people, you find yourself giving it a good thought. For example, I gave an example on children in the prior episode on how they need some time to enter a new place or possibly even every place they go to, even if they visited multiple times, to take things in, the changes, what stayed the same, and to assess if it's safe. So they may be seen as afraid, as fearful, or shy. The same goes for adults. But let's give an example on a bigger scale. For example, going for hiking or a camping trip. They may avoid it because they think a lot and consider everything that may go wrong and decide not to go or chicken out. Therefore, they are still considered as fearful people or not social and shy because they are avoiding a social gathering, and therefore they're seen as introverts, as people who are not outgoing or spontaneous. And because of their overthinking, they tend to worry a lot and be anxious, which may lead to depression and feel like they just want to isolate themselves. So this is how depth of processing may look like if it's not worked on. Now, of course, it varies from person to person because of many variables like our childhoods, experiences that may or may not have led us to work on ourselves and grow. Now, how does it look like as a strength? Well, first of all, if you embrace it, you will acquire a lot of knowledge because you're curious. You ask a lot, you research, you learn. So you become more wise and you make wise decisions even if it takes you slightly longer. You're a great problem solver. You have a strong intuition. And by the way, the more you trust it and listen to it, the stronger it gets. And you will find that you know yourself more than other people know themselves. Because you have a rich inner world, you question things and yourself, and you spot what you don't like about yourself, decide on how you want to be, after a lot of thinking and analyzing, of course, and work on yourself to become that person. And when it comes to the overthinking, you are able to differentiate when it's beneficial and when it's a waste of time and it's just worrying you. Anna, I like to say that overthinking is my superpower. For many years, though, it was not. It was exhausting me and crippling me and slowing me down. Now, I know how and when to use it and when to calm it down by using tools like what's the worst that could happen? And if it did happen, what can I do about it? So I take my overthinking a step further and think more to calm myself down. Because once I find a solution to the worst case scenario, I'm calmer and more confident. And also, another tool is the most realistic scenario. So, okay, I thought about the worst case scenario. Let me go ahead and think about the best case scenario and then the most probable, the most realistic one, because that's the most likely to happen. A third tool is that's future Dana's problem. I got this idea from watching How I Met Your Mother. I don't know if you've seen the show, but there was a scene where Ted and Marshall were addressing a potential problem. I think it was like who would take the couch if one of them had to move out. And they were discussing it as they're playing with swords, okay? Then one of them said, that's future Ted and Marshall's problem. And then they fast forward to the future and they're fighting about who the couch goes to. So it's funny. But for me, I was like, wait, that's a good idea, especially for anxiety. Like when I'm worried about something that didn't happen yet, and that's what anxiety is all about, let me just postpone the worry. As in, I'll worry about it later, when and if it happens. These tools help me a lot with overthinking and anxiety, and therefore the overthinking that I was struggling from became a superpower. And you can turn the overthinking into a superpower too. Also, when you've turned depth of processing into a strength, you tend to become great at planning and risk assessment. So you tend to be great at jobs that require that. And on the example of hiking and camping, you would either plan for it properly or decide that you won't go based on your risk assessment. So now, how do you work on yourself to turn depth of processing into a strength rather than overwhelm? First of all, and with all of these 4 aspects, you need to acknowledge that everything takes time and require a lot of practice to see improvement. So you need to be patient with yourself and keep trying. Secondly, I believe that organization is key here. When you have a lot going on, you need to organize it in order to process it one by one. So when it comes to the topic that you are overthinking about, process it through writing it down, journaling. Writing things down is different from just thinking about them. When we think, we tend to go into loops and loops of pretty much the same thought. But while we write, we move forward towards solutions. We write to figure out what we need to do and develop an action plan. And sometimes what we need to do is nothing. So just realizing that we need to do nothing and being okay with it helps us calm down. And with regards to risks, if you are in a place where you're not allowing yourself to try new things or experience life because of this overthinking and worry, then you need to take it one step at a time. Find something new that is, as per your risk assessment, is doable. Do it and take it from there. The more we do things and prove to ourselves that we are capable of doing them, our confidence grows and our capabilities extend. So take it step by step. And with regards to intuition, as mentioned, the more you listen to it and trust it, the stronger it gets. So if you feel like you don't have a strong intuition, start by asking yourself, how do I feel about this? Whether it's a person, a job, an idea, or whatever. Notice your feelings and thoughts. Now, whether you decide to go with them or against them, that's fine. Just make sure you note them down, and then when the outcome is there, observe if you were right or not. And continue, keep asking yourself about your feelings to grow your intuition, which, if you are a highly sensitive person, it's already there, but might need some dusting if it's not used. Next, overstimulation. So yes, highly sensitive people are easily overstimulated by noise, light, smell, crowds, having a lot to do and multitasking. So when there is a lot going on and they need to concentrate, need to get things done, they may snap. It just gets too much and they explode. And they tend to avoid crowded places or simply shut down if they were there. And they also tend to get easily stressed out and overwhelmed. Now, I wish I can tell you that this can be turned into a superpower, but unfortunately it can't. You will always notice these things and they will bother you. But you can always do something to manage them and keep yourself from snapping or shutting down. So how do you do that? If you live in a busy, loud household, aka you have children, you need to find the time for grounding work, for alone time that would energize you. Whether it's working out or writing to process your thoughts and emotions, meditation or breath work, and whether it's in the morning to set yourself up for the day and hopefully not snap at anyone, or in the middle of the day because you need a break, or at night when you finally have the time for yourself. What's important is that you do it to stay sane and stay yourself. Then when it comes to going to crowded places or gatherings in which you need to socialize, prepare yourself mentally for it and give yourself energizing time alone afterwards. Also, know your limits. Know when to leave. Very nicely, of course. Then, when there are so many loud things, loud noises going on around you, and you need to concentrate and get work done, then put on some earphones and listen to music. Listening to one thing is better than listening to many. It's still easier to concentrate. And just look at what you're working on to avoid visual overstimulation. Also, design environments with low sensory overload. As in, make sure your workspace is not cluttered and is visually peaceful, like it brings you peace and calm. Otherwise, you'll keep on tidying it up because you may feel like you can't concentrate if things aren't tidy. You need the outside to be organized for you to be able to concentrate inside. This is, of course, more difficult to manage when there are kids around. So instead, you may need to convince yourself that you like the mess. But that's another topic. Let's not go into it now. When it comes to having a lot to do and getting overstimulated because of that and the pressure and having what feels like 100 people coming to you for things that they need from you at work, then having a to-do list can be very helpful. One that prioritizes things in order. I know it's not always doable because of time limits, but it will for sure help your mind feel calmer. Next, E for emotional reactivity and empathy. And here I will discuss them separately. So when it comes to emotional reactivity, highly sensitive people seem to react more intensely to things than non-highly sensitive people. And usually, non-highly sensitive people would see that highly sensitive people are overreacting, over-exaggerating, are crazy or dramatic, you name it. But highly sensitive people feel things more. Things are a bigger deal for them than to a non-highly sensitive person. And as per her book, Elaine writes, data from surveys and experiments have already found some evidence that highly sensitive people react more to both positive and negative experiences. But we all tend to not see the positive and instead focus on the negative more. So fine, let me talk about the negative. This overreaction may look like outbursts, screaming, crying, a lot of crying, and or shutting down. That's because the emotions are overwhelming. And by the way, the more difficult your childhood was, the more you react impulsively. Highly sensitive people tend to take things personally, which adds to their reaction. And they are overthinkers, so they add things up together and it becomes a huge deal and the reaction will be huge. They also tend to feel bad and ashamed and frustrated for being too emotional. Now here I need to say, it's okay to feel however you are feeling. You have the right to feel whichever emotion comes up, and you need to see emotions as messages. Emotions are very important to understand and even base decisions on. And here I want to read you this part from her book. It says, there is a common misunderstanding that emotions cause us to think illogically. But recent scientific thinking, reviewed by psychologist Roy Baumeister, I think that's his name, and his colleagues, has placed emotions at the center of wisdom. One reason is that most emotion is felt after an event, which apparently serves to help us remember what happened and learn from it. The more upset we are by a mistake, the more we think about it and will be able to avoid it next time. The more delighted we are by a success, the more we think and talk about it and how we did it, causing us to be more likely to be able to repeat it. Other studies discussed by Baumeister that explore the contribution of emotion to clear thinking find that unless people have some emotional reason to learn something, they do not learn it very well or at all. This is one reason why it is easier to learn a foreign language in the country where it is spoken. We are highly motivated to find our way, converse when spoken to, and generally not seem foolish. From this point of view, it would seem almost impossible for a highly sensitive person to process things deeply without having stronger emotional reactions to motivate them. So here you can see the benefits of emotions and emotional reactions. They make us more wise. They help us remember, help us learn, tell us what is important to us, and they cause the depth of processing, which is a great strength in highly sensitive people. When we reframe it this way, we come to appreciate it. And as I was saying, you have the right to feel however you feel. Your feelings are valid. All emotions are acceptable to have, but not all behaviors are acceptable. You are an adult now and you need to learn to manage your emotions and respond in a better way. Even if you're a highly sensitive person and it's tough for you, it is still your responsibility. And this becomes a strength. Now, I don't want to say when you master your emotions, because for me, mastering them means 100%, and I don't think that's achievable, at least not all the time. But when you work on your emotions and get better at managing them, you gain multiple strengths. Being able to manage your emotions looks like this. You feel your emotion. You notice that you're feeling some type of way, and you name it. And here I say that you notice it because a lot of us, sometimes we don't even notice the emotion, either because of our busy life, the stress, no time, or simply because we don't reflect. So you notice the feeling, then you ask yourself, what made me feel this way? To pinpoint what upset you. Then you decide what you want or need to do about it. The more you practice it, the better you get at it. And the faster you'll be able to process your emotions. And this ability helps you build stronger and deeper relationships. Because you're sharing your emotions, you're communicating them in a way that helps the other person understand you. I'll talk more about communication in a different episode because it's also a very vital key in building relationships. But now let's go to empathy. Empathy is the ability to feel with another person what they are feeling and experiencing. But having a high level of empathy can be depleting because other people's emotions can affect your mood. If something happens with someone else, you see them, their face expressions, you put yourself in their shoes and feel what they are feeling and have that really affect you and your day, if not longer. And by the way, this also applies to stories on the news and even series or movies. And because you feel so deeply with others, you easily decide to put yourself on the side and do things for them instead. You somehow feel responsible for others' feelings and want to make them feel better. Years of that will lead you to become taken for granted and builds resentment within you. You also tend to feel emotionally exhausted after social gatherings and interactions. Sometimes you may confuse your emotions with others. Like you feel a certain way and you don't understand why. Meanwhile, it's not your emotion in the first place. And you may attract people that take advantage of your sensitivity and high empathy, aka narcissistic people. But empathy can also be a strength when managed. When you're highly empathetic, you build strong and deep relationships, just like when you know how to manage your emotions and reactions. You may not have a lot of friends, but you have really close ones. High empathy helps in jobs like therapists, life coaches, teachers, nurses, and really any jobs that require you to understand people and help them. It also makes you a great parent. Let's not forget the most important job out there. You need empathy to parent well. It makes you a great leader. A lot of organizations are now understanding the importance of leading with empathy. Because at the end of the day, employees, humans, are their biggest assets. Having empathy means that you are able to read people, which adds data to support your intuition, your gut feeling about people. And in order to work on your empathy to reap its benefits and reduce its downsides, you'll need to do the following. Set boundaries with others and have a balance of giving and receiving. Avoid watching tough stories on the news, and I know that you will feel guilty about that, but really, if you can't help, then you watching is just putting you down. So there's no benefit out of it. Another thing is limiting exposure to emotionally draining people. So notice the people that you feel drained after a meeting and limit meeting them. When it comes to coaching, because I get asked this, like, doesn't people's stories affect you since you're a highly sensitive person and very empathetic? And my answer is this. I protect myself by thinking and believing that as long as I know that I can help them, talking to them and listening to them actually gives me energy. And it's true. This is how I set my emotional boundaries. Now people do it differently, but for me, this way helps me a lot. And another thing you can do to manage your empathy is journaling to process your emotions. This also helps you to identify when the emotions are not yours. Like when you ask yourself enough, why are you upset? And then you pinpoint it to after a certain event or after meeting someone, then you can realize that this emotion is not yours. It came from another person. Next, and finally, the fourth one, S, for sensitivity to subtle stimuli. which means that you notice the small details that others miss, like change in tone, facial expression, change in the environment, or anywhere you go to for multiple times, that is. You notice the different textures of clothes and may be irritated by some. You notice all the sounds that you're able to hear around you, and so on. So all of this, of course, will add to your overstimulation, as we've mentioned before. Also, you may find that small things irritate you. Like if things are not in their place, you need to put them in their place. So if you're working, for example, and notice that there's something out of its place, you will feel the urge to put it back in its place. This doesn't help with focus and concentration to get things done. Also, noticing the subtleties can make you more anxious because you may notice the little cues and overinterpret or assume the worst because, again, of the negative overthinking. So that makes you more anxious. But this can be turned into a great strength. It makes you very detail-oriented. You notice the details. You make less mistakes. It makes your awareness sharper than most people. It makes you pick up the warning signs, the patterns, and the opportunities early because of your exceptional observation skills. Now, in order to turn this aspect into a strength, you need to learn to filter what matters and what doesn't, and tell yourself that this doesn't matter and that you actually like it that way. If there was something not in its place, for example, your words, your thoughts make all the difference. Now, if there's something that you noticed and you actually need to do something about it, but it's not urgent, just write it down. Write it on your to-do list because otherwise your brain will keep bugging you about it just not to forget it. And when you notice that you are getting anxious because of noticing little things here and there and putting it together in a negative way and imagining the worst case scenario, then think about the most realistic scenario and calm yourself down. And really reframe the idea of being a highly sensitive person into a positive tendency to have. It may seem like a weakness to most because O and E scream the loudest. Being easily overstimulated and reacting emotionally may have made you a bit difficult to handle as a child. D and S do not show as loudly or are even difficult to notice if your parents aren't highly sensitive themselves. And then whatever label that you were labeled as a child, whether it's sensitive, shy, a crybaby, dramatic, difficult, stubborn, or fearful, may have stuck with you and became a limiting belief about yourself. So reframe it to become your strength and continuously work on yourself to be a better version of yourself. That's it for me today. I hope this episode helps you understand yourself better and gave you tools to transform what you once thought of as weaknesses into strength. And if you feel like you know someone who is highly sensitive, then share with them this episode. ويلا, see you next time.